Horizon Gents, on Rusuji Reacts, and this is Trope Talk Evil Empires by the channel Sarcastic Production. This week we're diving into a much narrower trope than last time. Let's talk about what kind of merry despots your heroes might encounter. Okay, the pros and cons of an army of faceless minions, and a few instances of the many unique varieties of the evil overlord. Yeah. Evil empires, basically, that's one of the, whenever you have really good and bad, good and evil type of thing, like even the Star Wars and things, an empire always helps to amplify the evilness, right? Like, if somebody's evil, screw that. But if somebody's evil and he has an empire of some sort, I mean, that's even heavy, because that brings off the, real world type of thing. Like, in real world, what gives you really power? Resources, people, that's it. An empire. If you are an empire, you are really powerful because you have lots of political strength here and there. You have lots of money, lots of resources, lots of power. It's not so easy to go against you. That's why empires are basically one of the hardest and most dangerous thing there is. In movies, TV shows, games, whatever, evil empires fall. Even though we know real life that's not the case. Some one person or even the team of person cannot just take on an entire empire. That's not how things work in real world. Usually they are the one who's gonna get screwed. Empires are empire. But yeah, it's always a fun thing to see, like, oh, look at that, just one or few people took down an entire empire. It's always fun to see a movie about that or something like that. But yeah, remember people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction today. There's a link in the description. Check out the cast all the plays like Sarcastic Production reaction. Upload lots of videos from this channel already. If you haven't seen them, check out that. Upload lots of videos in 24 hours. So you might have missed some notification here and there. So check out, it's all there. Check out the playlist too, like Tier Zoo, History, Internet Historian, CGP Grey. Yeah, let's do this one.
Think fast. How do you turn a plucky band of heroes into the underdogs? With an evil empire, of course. Their enemy needs to be strong in a dimension they're not, and nothing says unheroic but powerful like an army of faceless minions in a castle with spikes on. The evil empire is a literary manifestation of everything that your heroes typically aren't. That is, organized, powerful, and placed, and with definitive leadership. Oh, and evil. Now this is useful because it serves as a foil to the heroes. The contrast between them shows deeper aspects of the protagonists. But there's another advantage to having an evil empire, which is that you get to make it powerful in a dimension that your heroes just aren't equipped to fight. You don't necessarily make them more powerful, just differently powerful. And an evil empire is just one instance of this trope. In that case, organization and strength of numbers are unlikely to be assets to the heroes. But this is just one instance of—
Yeah. Found family, diverse skill set, character, interactions, ships, small, disorganized. Yeah, okay. So the point is, I can only think of Batman as the one who's a good guy but has an empire too, Wayne Corporation, whatever, because he deals with most of alien type massive magical enemies or some sort of type of thing. But it is weird to see, right, in that scene. But about Joker, I mean, Joker doesn't have an empire, right? He's a Joker. I mean, he's a single person. He usually, can take people, manipulate them in a way, but he doesn't really have an empire. Well, Bruce Wayne has an empire. So that's kind of a opposite situation there, right? Bruce Wayne has an empire of a company, basically, and, Joker is like a single person. That's the only instance where I can think that's opposite like that.
Of a larger trope used to make your villains actually threatening, which is to make your villain dangerous to the hero in a way they can't defend against or fight. I'll probably talk about this in more detail when I do a video on villains in general, but for a quick discussion of one of the most classic examples of this, look at Lex Luthor. It's obvious that his enemy, Superman, is stronger than him physically in nearly every way, which is why Lex is only a threat because he has the smarts to actually do damage to him. Now, in some instances, Lex is just written as using his intelligence to make big scary monsters for Superman to fight. But that's not where he shines. Lex is at his most dangerous to Superman when he turns public opinion against him. And it doesn't sound like much, but when Lex makes the people think that Superman can't be trusted, there's nothing he can do about it. There's an example of that in the Justice League cartoon, where Lex basically tricks Superman into destroying a low-income housing development. Obviously, Superman had a reason to think he was doing the right thing, but all Lex has to do is decry him as paranoid to the media, and there's nothing Superman can do about it. Sure, Lex has done bad things in the past, but he's pulling a very convincing changed man act, and now Superman looks like the irrational one for a reasonable bout of justified paranoia. And it's not a problem Superman can punch, so there's no way for him to fight it. Now, the strong heroes—
Yeah, this is why I think in real world, Superman would be one of the weaker superheroes for that reason as well. First of all, he's a guy who's literally untouchable, infallible, basically. So people are already a bit scared of him, even if he's a good guy. because if it turns bad, it's really bad. That's our mentality basically. When we see something powerful, we always fear it. We don't even know if there are aliens or not, but we fear it. Why? Because they could be powerful and they could be bad. Same thing applies to Superman. So it would be so easy to turn people against him by doing something like that. But I don't remember any movies about Superman where Lex Luthor basically does something like that. He usually goes to some kind of an island with I guess what is that? I forgot that meteor thing that's supposed to make Superman weak. That green thing. I forgot the name of that. He uses that to somehow try to attack Superman. That's how the movies go. But it is so weird to see that animated series are more creative than the movies, using this kind of mentality, turning people against him and things like that.
The smart villain dichotomy is a very popular one, but it obviously isn't the only one. The one that's more common in, say, anime is the villain whose strength is in raw power, and the heroes whose strength is in each other. Alone, they can't oppose him, but when they work through all their emotional issues, they compile the strength to take him down. I'll talk about the power of friendship in another video.
Oh yeah, that is how the Mass Effect goes, right? I mean, in Mass Effect, if you play it right, you realize that you have to do these loyalty missions because you gather up all this to your teammates, but you have to have them, you have to have them as your friend, basically, not just teammate. You have to gain their trust or something, otherwise they die in the end or something like that. So they took that from anime, huh? But I'm sorry, in real life, this is not, only thing that took down the evil was love. That doesn't work in real life. So I don't know why I feel weird hearing that. But yeah, why the hell not?
But there's a reason why those scenarios tend to include some kind of protagonisty speech about how real strength comes from fighting for something greater than yourself, or whatever. And in the Evil Empire case, the strength of the Empire tends to be in numbers, while that of the heroes tends to be something like guerrilla warfare and clever tactic, or individual abilities, or whatever. Now, the Evil Empire is especially useful because, unlike the lone villain, it seems monolithic and impossible to destroy. There's only so intimidating one guy can be, but an empire? That's huge! What can one guy, or rather one group of misfit heroes, do against something like that? Well, that's where the story tends to break down, because the answer is usually beat up the boss and win the day without regard to the actual consequences of a cultural collapse or acknowledging the fact that if you beat up the boss, there's usually a line of succession set up to guarantee the empire persists even after the boss is taken down. There's a reason why fantasy novels—
Yeah, but wait a minute, that's not the whole story, right? I mean, the story could be more complicated, like, the empire could just be a tool to the main guy, the main evil boss. And the application of the company that main evil boss puts out, like how he uses the company, is what's evil, and it's just his vision, nobody else's, not companies, nobody else's. It's just the way he uses the company and its resources to do evil. So if you remove the boss, whoever takes his place won't necessarily do the same type of evil, So it's usually that kind of a thing that's in place whenever somebody just removes the boss. But yeah, I mean, if the empire is evil, not just the boss, then yeah, it makes sense that removing the boss does nothing. That's the same thing that happened in, I think, Star Wars. Palpatine killed, the Darth Vader dies in the end. That did nothing. Empire comes back. Obviously, that's the new movies. So, but most of the time, whenever there's an empire and whenever there's the main evil guy, the antagonist, basically he's the one who's using the company to do things bad. The company doesn't necessarily want to do bad. In that sense, if you remove the boss, it usually is fine.
Will often include a rightful heir who can step in and fill the power vacuum when the other good guys finish playing Stomp the Tyrant. Now the problem here is when you draw on reality, you end up with a situation that's less Prince Caspian and more Game of Thrones. When you break down an empire, you need another structure to take its place. Taking down the bad king and putting up a good one only works in stories, but is unsustainable in reality. You might end up with a benevolent dictator, but give it a few generations and the rulers will have forgotten why they bothered to be benevolent in the first place. So in the absence of a rightful heir storyline, a lot of the time the writer will just have the empire crumble when its leader is defeated. But the problem is when you overthrow a system, you need another one. A cursory—
Yeah, that is so true, isn't it? Nobody really thinks about that, but this is such a good point. Like, it usually is the mentality of everyone, not just in movies, games, but even in real world. Any guerrilla warfare usually, revolves around that. Like, if we just crumble that empire, government, or whatever it is, whatever is left, the pieces will basically fall, where it should be or whatever. Anybody who rises up basically figure it out. Or everything will be fine basically if we just crumble this empire. But history tells us that's not how thing goes, right? I mean, when you crumble something up, whatever is left is basically chaos. It goes out of hand because that's just human nature. Whatever's left, people will basically go into chaos mode. They'll become cynical, start to do bad things. and it's just chaos all around. And usually evil entities are more persistent, more driven, so entities will rise up again to take the place or something like that. So another evil guy might rise up. So it's not always like, just crumble the empire, everything will be fine. No, you have to make sure that after that you build an empire that is stable and good if you're going to crumble empire. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos.
A glance at a history textbook will tell you that the French Revolution led to 10 years of complete chaos while they tried to sort out who should be in charge and how. See, stuff like this is why evil empire stories tend to stop before they have to address what happens in the aftermath.
Yeah, that's so true, right? This is perfect example of this revolution. Basically, everybody went to guillotine. It was such a chaos. Like, certain people just went mad with the power. Anybody who just the neighbors basically just went to the people in power and said, this is some kind of a conspirator or whatever, just because they didn't like it, we'll throw him to the gallows. People died left and right. Their heads chopped off left and right. This is a great example of that. Like, chaos always goes bad.
But this is only a problem if the empire contains people we're supposed to care about. If it's an empire subjugating people we like, we want to know they'll be okay after their government falls apart, so those stories tend to invoke the rightful heir thing so we get the feeling they'll have some sort of support structure in place. It's unlikely to last beyond the rightful heir's lifetime, but that's the scale we care about, so it seems to suffice for the time being. But if the empire is all evil, well, who cares, right? Sauron only ruled the orcs and some explicitly evil humans. Who cares if their government falls apart? So as soon as his big eyeball tower explodes, all that's left to do is the cleanup in the actual places we do care about. And that kind of
You don't know that. Maybe some of those orcs were forced. Maybe some of those orcs just care about their family and their small kids who just wanted food with their teary eyes. You don't know that.
Evil empire is both safer and less believable to play with because it's got no grounding in reality. It only exists for literary efficiency. In the real world, there are no purely evil empires, no situation where all collateral damage is justified because all the bystanders were also evil, but fantasy and sci-fi love making entirely evil species that conquer other, non-evil empires in an easy-to-repair manner, so when their empire falls, the subsidiary good guy empires can go back to normal while the central bad guy empire collapses.
That's lazy writing right there. Whenever I see something like that, I always think that, I have thought about it in the past. Whenever I see something like that, like truly evil empire with the evil people, I'm like, that's a bit of lazy. You should have made it more complex. And solutions should have been more complex rather than just evil, just hammer that empire and that's it, movie's done. That's kind of lazy.
Completely. The only collateral in that case is the population, and hey, we already don't like them. Now, one thing that complicates all evil empire stories is that your heroes just aren't going to be enough to take them down on their own. There's that whole strength of numbers problem again. Even if the dramatic bit boils down to a 1v1 fight between the mainest hero and the big bad boss, you need an army to fight an army. There's a reason why your heroes will generally either join with or start a resistance movement, or failing that, strike up an alliance with a friendly empire and take care of their personal vendettas while the allied army does all the legwork. Now, the most important aspect of the evil empire is the evil emperor. The complexities of the empire will be heavily determined by the nature of its dictator. Now, there are a few main kinds, so let's take a look at them. This obviously isn't an exhaustive list, but it is a broad categorization that I find works pretty well. The first kind is the emperor with an agenda. This particular bad guy is notable in that he doesn't micromanage the workings of his empire. Usually he's content to pursue his own dark objectives, like evil sorcery or living forever. Sure, he's doing bad stuff, but he doesn't tend to concern himself with the personal scale workings of his empire. He tends to be bad news for the heroes because they've managed to attract his attention somehow, so he'll mobilize his elite mooks to take him down and or insist on giving them personal attention. Defeating this guy is liable to have immediate good consequences because a lot of the time his control over his empire is at least somewhat supernatural, but sometimes that means he's also the only thing holding the infrastructure together, and without him the empire will pull a Rome and collapse under its own weight. The second kind is the decadent bad guy. He also doesn't tend to have much influence on the inner workings of his empire beyond the occasional gladiatorial arena, mostly because there's likely to be 14 layers of bureaucracy between him and the actual civilians. This emperor is a man-child. He does what he wants, indulges whatever villainous ideas he has, and basically just takes advantage of his absolute power. He's very dangerous on a personal scale because he has no constraints and no sense of propriety, and this is why he's generally not really in charge. His bureaucracy is more likely to be made up of overly ambitious people trying to manipulate the system for their own benefit, but the emperor just tends towards some good old-fashioned chaotic evil. Taking this guy down won't do anything to the structural integrity of the empire, but putting a rightful heir in his place could possibly set things on the right course once they scrub out the bureaucracy a little. The third kind is the maniac. He's completely chaotic, ruling entirely through fear. Do something wrong, he'll have you executed. Look at him funny, he might have you executed. This bad guy is bad news because he keeps his entire empire on edge at all times. No slight is too small for this guy to take it out on you.
Yeah, Game of Thrones, I watched it, I guess for few seasons, not few, four, I don't know how much season, I think 4 seasons, I don't know. First season, I thought, the Ned Stark, the main guy, I thought he's gonna go all the way until the end, gonna be main character, but no, he was killed in the first season, Sean Bean. I like the actor, so I was more invested into the actor and the character too. When the character was killed, that kind of soured things for me. But then I like, okay, you know what? This is still good. I'm gonna watch it. So I still watched it. But then after that, I don't know, man. It was too much soap drama. I didn't like it.
The good news is, there is almost inevitably a rebellion brewing with a well-thought-out plan to assassinate him, possibly even orchestrated by his own government. The bad news is, this guy probably really likes making examples out of people, so your heroes will probably have to stop at least one public execution. Fortunately, there is no way killing this guy will make the people's situation any worse, so feel free to have your characters throw out some justified regicide without worrying too much about his citizens. Related to option 3 is option 4, the Grumpy Usurper. This is the guy who probably murdered his way up the line of succession and or got the rightful heir, a character who's practically inevitable in this scenario, exiled in order to make way for his ascension. This guy is almost inevitably a terrible king because he's too spiteful and petty to prioritize the
This is the most famous thing. It's even in the mythologies. Even in Indian mythologies, things like this exist usually. There is Vishnu Avatar Krishna. Everybody knows that. There's also Vishnu Avatar Sri Ram. So that's the case with him. Just somebody, I don't know the detail. I'm not going to talk about detail here. But usually he got exiled for 14 years or something like that. So this is the same thing like that. Somebody who wants power, so make somebody else exile or kill them or something like that. This is the most famous thing.
Picture. Worst comes to worst, he'll evolve into option 3 as a way of coping with his insecurities about not being the proper heir or a proper ruler. This guy's convenient because his story comes preloaded with the walking solution, the rightful heir. Insert rightful heir A into throne B and you're basically done. Now as for evil empresses, that is specifically female rulers, because these options could all technically be unisex, there are 2, and they're basically hot and cold. Cold is the Ice Queen. She's ruthless, heartless, and likely to order torture or execution without a second thought. Now, whether or not she's a good ruler is completely arbitrary. Sometimes she restricts her cruelty to enemies of her empire, sometimes it extends into a passionless ruthlessness towards her own people. You're about 50-50 on that one. Hot is basically the female variant of option 3 with an added dose of villainous perviness. This one is gleefully cruel and probably runs some sort of slave-based empire. She also might try to make at least one of the heroes her consort. Oh, and either of these options could also be a daddy's villain if her father was similarly evil. Each of these emperor archetypes come with their own matching empire and personalized problems that arise when they're taken down. So what kind of emperor you use is probably informed by what kind of heroes you're throwing at him. But regardless, the sheer variety of bad guy emperors definitely show how freaking common this trope is, and why. There are so many stories that can only easily be told in the context of an evil empire. If you want your heroes desperate and on the run, this is an easy way to do it. If you want a daring and sneaky rescue mission, same deal. If you're partial to exiled royalty, one of these probably sprang up in their absence. Basically, this trope recurs so often because
I think it's more of a normal thing. It's because in the real world, it's kind of a common thing, the empires. Whether evil or not, that's not the point. Everybody realized the empires in the real world. So we can relate because we know of empires here and there. So when we see an empire basically get taken down by just a small number of people or even the one guy, it's always interesting to see like how is he going to do that? That mentality. Whether we think it or not, that's what our mind is telling us. Like, how is he going to do that? It's going to be interesting. So that's why it's one of the most used thing, empires, because it's powerful. We know it in real world. And one guy or even group of guys taking it down is kind of surreal, but it's still fun to see how he's going to do that, how they're going to do that. So yeah.
It's useful and can be developed to an absurd degree of complexity if you want it to be. So.
Yep, there you go. So that was the evil empires. Yeah, I like this trope talk series, man. To talk about all the different tropes. I usually don't think about things like this, but it's always fun to realize something like this because you always, in your deep mind, you know all these things, but you never really specifically think about it. So I like this series like this where she talks about things in detail like this, and it's always fun. Alright, people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction date. There's a link in the description. Check out the cast all the playlists like Oli Sarcastic Production. I've reacted to quite a few videos from this channel already. I usually upload 2 videos in a day. It usually is history video, blues history video, and then mythology. But sometimes I also react, rates 2 videos. But yeah, I started doing 2 videos. So I've reacted to quite a few videos from this channel already. So check that out. Check out the playlist to like Internet Story. I did, I think, almost all of them. Maybe missed some of them here and there. It's all same thing with the CGP Grey. Tier Zoo. Tier Zoo is a great channel. I love all the zoology and things like that. So check all that out, and yeah, And if you want to react to any video even from this channel, I guess comment down. I'll eventually react to it even if I don't reply. And yeah, I guess I'll see you next time.